Hello kings, hello brothers. In this video, I'm going to be talking about vulnerability and how vulnerability is actually a skill. There's a lot of talk out there about vulnerability, about how men need to be more vulnerable, and vulnerability can feel scary, especially if we've learned to keep our cards close to our chests. And does vulnerability mean that we start telling everything to everybody? And sometimes there's this fear with vulnerability of, if I'm vulnerable, are people going to think I'm weak or lose respect for me? And a big part of this video is I'm going to be sharing how we can develop the skill of vulnerability so that instead of being weak, we actually become stronger. Instead of people losing respect for us, they actually gain respect for us. Vulnerability is essentially sharing what's going on inside of us. And when we're skilled at doing that, people want to follow us as leaders. It makes the people around us feel safer, and it's really attractive to women. But a lot of times, men are taught that we need to project this image of having it all together, of having our ducks in a row, of being okay all of the time. And we also have this thing that we need to put out to the world that we don't need help. And that's the lone wolf mentality. And this golden boy image of having it all together all the time is something that I worked really hard at for years to project. And I was pretty successful at it. From the outside looking in, my life looked pretty perfect, if perfect is what you would get from the manual that society passes down to us of great job, good relationship, save for a home, get a little dog, blah blah blah, follow the steps, and then I'll be happy. But I was miserable. Those were some of the hardest years of my life, and while I was in them, I wasn't telling anybody about it. Behind the scenes, I couldn't get an erection for a couple of years due to a benign brain tumor that was happening. And on top of that, I was in a relationship I felt trapped in that ultimately wasn't for me. And I had a lot of shame about both of those things. And I didn't tell anybody. I was that lone wolf. I didn't know how to be vulnerable. I didn't know I could be vulnerable. And the weight of that was absolutely crushing me, holding that all in, trying to keep that golden boy image together. So much so that there was a time when I was driving downtown on the highway to go teach a yoga class, and I remember thinking that it would be way easier to just drive my car off the side of the highway at 80 miles per hour than deal with everything that was happening internally. And there was a moment when I was later on sitting inside my car just shaking. I couldn't start the car, I couldn't move, I couldn't do anything. All of this weight was just on top of me, and I knew that I couldn't carry it alone anymore. And something told me that I needed to call somebody. And my phone felt like it weighed 10 pounds, and I didn't know who to call. So I called my dad, and I told him what was happening. I told him the way that I was feeling. And in that moment, it felt like a miracle. Suddenly, I felt lighter. And what had happened was I had tapped into the power of vulnerability. I'd felt like I couldn't breathe for months, like I was underwater. And just the simple act of calling my dad and telling him what was happening in my internal world felt like I could breathe again. And that moment of vulnerability was the beginning of a lot of beautiful things for me. It was the beginning of all my relationships deepening. It was the beginning of me starting to live in integrity with my true nature. It was the beginning of me clearing all this shame that I've been holding for years. And that's the power that I discovered in vulnerability. And for any man who's on the edge of vulnerability that kind of wants to give it a try or isn't sure, it can feel really scary. Maybe that man thinks that people will think he's a bad person or be disappointed in him or think that he's weak. And what will probably happen, those things could happen, And that's part of the skill of vulnerability, is finding safe people to be vulnerable with. But once you find those safe people, what will happen is they won't be disappointed. They'll be proud of you. They won't think you're weak. They'll think you're brave. They won't think you're a bad person. They'll just think you're a human that's been through some hard stuff, just like they have. And you'll find that you're able to connect with people on a much deeper level. And the second fear that men have on the verge of vulnerability, which is a result of this all or nothing, black or white male mind, is that they think it's all or nothing. They think it's either or, that either they are this stoic, stone cold man who doesn't express emotions at all, or they are an overly emotional wreck who is a drain to everyone around them. And developing the skill of vulnerability is about finding a happy medium between the two. And there is absolutely a healthy balance. Finding that healthy balance comes with developing the skill of emotional processing. And I'll share my journey of developing the ability to process my emotions. Is that for about 10 years, I didn't shed a tear. I was completely disconnected from my emotions. And it's not that sad things didn't happen. It's not that I didn't lose people close to me. I just couldn't express my grief. I couldn't express my anger. I just stuffed those things so far down that I thought I didn't have those emotions. And emotions are universal human experiences. We all have them whether we know it or not. So I hadn't cried in 10 years. And then I had life serve me an incredibly difficult experience. And life just happened in a way that broke the dam. And I rediscovered my tear ducts. And through that process, through working with coaches, through going to therapy, through sitting in meditation, I reconnected with my emotions. And that road was pretty rocky for several months, where after not crying for 10 years, I was crying, it seemed like every other day. And I wondered, is it going to be like this forever? Like, why am I crying so much? And what had happened, and this is really normal in any type of transformation process, is I had been at one extreme, no emotion or not feeling emotion. And now I was at the other extreme, feeling and expressing a lot of emotion. And I had to taste both ends before I could start to find that healthy balance. And over time, that happened for me. Part of my processing journey is that I couldn't really feel things unless I was talking about them, unless I was verbally expressing them with someone. So it was really important to me that I had safe, compassionate people around me who would not shame me for my emotions, that I could talk through things with. Some of them were therapists, some of them were coaches, some of them were friends, and actually express my emotions and experience that was okay to do. And then after I worked through that for a time of processing my emotions in conversation with people, I discovered that I was able to process my emotions alone. So even after this big blow up in my life and I'm feeling emotions again, I still couldn't feel emotions alone. I still couldn't tap into tears when I was alone. And eventually over time, I remember there was one morning, I'd just been through a breakup. Months later, I was sitting in meditation. At this time, I was meditating for an hour in the morning and an hour at night. I had just done my Vipassana meditation course. And I was sitting in meditation and it just came. And that was the first time that I had cried alone in over a decade. And I remember realizing that it was a whole new world that I'd opened to my emotional world. And so once I got to that place, I started to develop a way of processing my emotions that felt healthy, that felt like it wasn't a drain on the people around me. And so this is a really important key for anybody that's in romantic relationship or wants to be in romantic relationship, is I would encourage you not to real time process with your woman or with your partner. That when you are mid process, meaning that you're feeling a type of way, you're feeling confused, You're not sure why you're feeling this way. You don't know what needs to happen for you to feel better. You don't know what the resolution is. You are mid process. You are still working through things. And my encouragement is that you do not bring that to your woman, that you sit with yourself, that you see a therapist or coach, or you journal, or you meditate, and you try to work through some of these things outside of your romantic relationship. And the reason for that is that if you show up in your romantic relationship with these big emotions, feeling confused, not knowing what to do, one, it creates a lack of safety for your woman or for your partner. And that is one of the number one things that a masculine protector is here to provide in a relationship is safety. And the second is that it may feel like a heavy responsibility on your partner to help you process those emotions. Instead, we need to develop the capacity to process on our own. Maybe that's with somebody else, maybe it's a brother or a therapist or a coach, so that when we do bring our process into our relationship, we can say, hey, this is what I've been feeling, this is what I've been going through, here's what I now know, and here's what I think I need. Maybe that's a request from your partner, or maybe that's just something that you need to do for yourself. And when we approach our emotional process in that way, it actually creates safety for our woman, knowing that we can do that process on our own. Now, there are times when she is willing and able to hold us in a process that can deepen our connection. But notice if you are showing up to your romantic partner trying to offload your discomfort or using your vulnerability as a legitimate avenue for deeper connection and intimacy. Another really key consideration when it comes to being skilled at vulnerability is choosing the people and places to be vulnerable with. Unskilled vulnerability is telling everyone everything, and that can create a lot of havoc in our lives. So we need to be discerning about the people who we bring our internal world to. We need to bring it to people who are not going to judge us, shame us, or tell us what we should do. We need to find people that will instead listen, hold space non-judgmentally, and will ask us questions to help us get clear. No one else has the answers for us, but when we are confused, sometimes other people reflecting opportunities for us to explore deeper through questions can get us exactly where we need to be. So maybe you attend a men's group, maybe you call a really close friend or a parent, somebody who is going to love you no matter what, who is not going to shame you or condemn you for anything that you bring to the table. There's also an opportunity to do your emotional processing alone, and this develops a bit more skill. It's a skill that you can learn from a coach or a therapist, but processing alone, for me, a lot of the times it involves writing things down in my journal. If I'm feeling a deep emotion, sometimes I'll characterize that emotion and actually line by line have a dialogue with that emotion in my journal. So it might look like this. I might be feeling sad. I might write, hey grief, what are you doing here? And then the next line, I have grief respond. I'm here because of this loss. And line by line, I just explore that emotion and see what comes up. There's also incredible work that we can do with our physical sensations. There's incredible work that we can do in stillness and in silence, in meditation, but these skills can take some time to build. So if you're just leaning into vulnerability, my encouragement is to find somebody safe that you can share with. The last tip that I'll share with you for being skillful with your vulnerability is what's called a containment strategy. So a containment strategy is what's going to keep you from falling to your knees in the grocery store or from randomly soaking your partner's shoulder with tears. So, at any time in our lives, emotions can sneak up on us. We're not always sure where they came from, and sometimes they can pop up randomly. Maybe we're driving, maybe we are in the middle of a presentation or working with a client, and that is not the time for us to feel the emotion or process. So, a containment strategy is actually compartmentalizing, is noticing, okay, hey, in this moment, I am feeling angry. And this is not the appropriate time or place for me to express my anger. So, we're going to set a strategy that, okay, after this or tonight at 7 p.m., I'll be alone, I'll be free, or I'll be with this trusted friend. That is when I'm going to explore and express this anger. So, a containment strategy is about creating and committing to another place or time where you can express and explore that emotion. What the containment strategy guarantees is one, that we don't sabotage anything important that's happening in the present moment, and that we don't repress that emotion, that we actually come back to it and allow ourselves to feel it. Emotions are energy in motion, and if we don't allow us to move through us, they get stuck. We become low energy, we become cloudy in the mind, physical dis-ease manifests. So it's really important that we do not repress, or we do not try to push any emotions into the background that we know are there. So a containment strategy is, now is not the time, that is the time, and I'm committing to sitting with and feeling this emotion or talking with a friend at this time. So I hope this video helped you understand some of the nuance of vulnerability, that we get to pick and choose our arenas for vulnerability. It's not tell everybody everything. It's not become this waterworks sob story, that it actually allows us to become better leaders. It allows us to connect with others more deeply. It allows us to create more safety for our women and for our partners. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.